I always thought I had it all, a life that most people could only dream of. At 48, I was a successful businessman with a thriving company, a sprawling mansion that sat proudly on the hill, and a collection of luxury cars that turned heads wherever I went. My wife, Emily, was the icing on the cake. Stunning, charming, and the envy of every man who laid eyes on her. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple, living the kind of life that was fit for a magazine cover. But as I would soon discover, perfection is nothing more than an illusion. Our relationship was one that most would consider a modern-day fairy tale. We met at a charity gala years ago, and sparks flew immediately. She was captivating, beautiful, intelligent, and always the life of the party. We quickly became inseparable, and before long, she moved into my house, taking her place at my side as my perfect partner. Everyone envied us, and why wouldn't they? We had everything: wealth, status, and what seemed like a rock-solid marriage. But behind the smiles and the glamorous parties, there was something darker brewing, something I hadn't seen coming. Enter Mark, my best friend since college. We had been through thick and thin together, building our careers side by side. He was the brother I never had, someone I trusted with my life. Emily adored him too, and our close-knit friendship was something I valued deeply. Little did I know, the very people I held closest were the ones who would cut the deepest. It started slowly, little things that at first seemed insignificant. Emily would stay up late, glued to her phone, laughing at messages she would never share with me. She began taking more girls' nights out, coming home later than usual, always with some flimsy excuse that never quite added up. Our once lively conversations dwindled into awkward silences, and her touch, once warm and affectionate, grew cold. I tried to brush off my unease, convincing myself that it was just a phase, that maybe she was going through something personal. After all, we were still attending social events arm in arm, still projecting that perfect image. Then there was Mark. At first, I thought he was just busy with work. He started canceling our regular golf games, avoiding our usual hangouts, and when we did manage to meet, he was always distracted, nervously checking his phone or looking at his watch. Our once easy friendship became strained, but I never pressed him about it. I figured he'd come to me when he was ready to talk. After all, we were like brothers, weren't we? But the more I tried to ignore it, the clearer the signs became. I noticed how Emily's smile no longer reached her eyes when she looked at me. She was always on edge, her phone never out of reach. One night, I caught a glimpse of a message notification that lit up her screen, just as she hurriedly flipped it over. The name on the screen was Mark. My stomach churned, but I pushed the thought away, telling myself it was nothing. Mark was my best friend. Emily was my wife. They wouldn't do this to me. They couldn't. But as the days went on, the nagging doubts refused to leave. There were too many late-night phone calls, too many whispered conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. I felt like a stranger in my own home, lost in a sea of secrets and lies. Every time Emily glanced at her phone, every time Mark's name came up, a sickening feeling washed over me. It was like I was piecing together a puzzle that I didn't want to solve. That's when it hit me, maybe I was the fool in my own story. Maybe the perfect life I had built was nothing more than a house of cards, waiting for the slightest gust of truth to bring it crashing down. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind swirling with suspicion, I decided to uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because one thing was certain, the perfect illusion I had been living was about to shatter, and when it did, there would be no going back. It was a cold Thursday evening, the kind where the chill seeps into your bones and leaves you feeling empty. Emily had told me she was meeting some friends for dinner, another one of her countless girls' nights out. But something about her tone that evening, the way she avoided eye contact as she slipped on her coat, made my suspicions flare up again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was a lie simmering just beneath her polished smile. So, I did something I had never done before, I followed her. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed behind her car as she navigated through the city streets. My heart pounded with each turn, the sound of my own doubts roaring louder with every passing second. I didn't know what I expected to find, but a part of me was still desperately clinging to the hope that I was wrong, that this was all just some elaborate misunderstanding. But hope has a way of shattering when faced with the undeniable truth. Emily's car eventually pulled into the parking lot of a well-known hotel on the outskirts of town. I parked a few spaces away, watching as she got out and looked around nervously, almost as if she could feel my eyes on her. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and hurried inside, disappearing through the lobby doors. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, a mix of fear and fury coursing through me. I waited a few agonizing minutes before following her in, my pulse racing as I stepped into the dimly lit lobby. I kept my distance, staying out of sight as I watched her head toward the elevators. She glanced around again before the doors slid open, and just as she was about to step inside, Mark appeared. He didn't look surprised, he looked expectant, like they had done this before. Like this was routine. The way they embraced, intimate, familiar, and completely at ease, was like a knife to the heart. They didn't see me standing there, partially hidden behind a column, but even if they had, I doubt they would have cared. I watched in silent horror as they exchanged a quick, passionate kiss, then slipped into the elevator together. The doors closed, sealing away whatever scraps of my marriage were left. I stood there, frozen, staring at the elevator doors long after they had disappeared. My entire world felt like it was crumbling around me. For a moment, I considered storming up to their room, kicking down the door, and confronting them right there. I imagined screaming, breaking things, making them feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused me. But I didn't. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked back to my car, my mind numb and my heart in shreds. As I sat in the driver's seat, the reality of what I had just witnessed hit me like a punch to the gut. The images replayed over and over in my mind, Emily's laughter, Mark's smirk, their hands intertwined as if I had never existed. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that it left no room for denial. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, this was a full-blown affair, planned and executed with precision. Alone in my car, I let the emotions consume me. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation, they all crashed over me in waves, threatening to drown me in despair. I thought about all the times I had defended her, all the gifts I had showered her with, and all the sacrifices I had made to ensure her happiness. And for what? To be betrayed by the two people I trusted most in the world? It was more than I could bear. But in that storm of emotions, something else began to take shape. It was small at first, just a flicker of an idea, but it grew quickly, fueled by the burning need for revenge. I realized I couldn't just walk away from this, I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. Emily had always been interested in my money more than anything else. She loved the lifestyle, the luxury, and the status that came with being my wife. And now, she thought she could keep it all, even with someone else on the side. Well, I was about to show her just how wrong she was. I spent the next few days in a haze of research, channeling my pain into something more productive. I met with my lawyer in secret, discussing ways to protect my assets. I began the process of rewriting my will, ensuring that Emily wouldn't see a single penny of my fortune. Every cent would go to a charity that helped betrayed spouses and single fathers, an organization that suddenly felt very close to my heart. The plan was simple, but devastating. Emily had no idea that her days of luxury were numbered, and neither did Mark. They thought they were untouchable, that I was just some fool they could keep in the dark. But now, I was the one pulling the strings, and when the time came, they would learn just how costly betrayal could be. As I sat there, plotting my revenge, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't just going to get even, I was going to take back control of my life. And when it was all over, Emily and Mark would be left with nothing but their own regrets. I stepped back into the house that night, wearing a mask of calm that concealed the storm raging within me. Emily was waiting, lounging on the sofa with a glass of wine in hand, as if she hadn't just spent the evening wrapped in the arms of another man. She glanced up at me with a rehearsed smile, her eyes searching mine for any hint of suspicion. But I gave her nothing. No anger, no confrontation, just the same old husband she had grown so comfortable deceiving. "Hey, honey. How was your night?" she asked, her voice light and casual, as if we were just two people living an ordinary life. "Fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just a long day at work. You know how it is." She nodded, offering me that same fake sympathy I had come to expect. I could see the relief in her eyes, the way she relaxed when she realized I wasn't onto her. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I needed her to believe that everything was normal, that I was still the clueless husband, blissfully unaware of the web of lies she had spun. I kissed her cheek, ignoring the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered on my lips, and went about my evening routine as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. While Emily continued her charade, I was quietly setting the wheels of my plan in motion. My lawyer and I met frequently, always under the guise of business meetings, so Emily wouldn't suspect a thing. We discussed every detail of my new will, ensuring that all my assets would bypass her entirely. My fortune would now go to a charity that supported single fathers and betrayed spouses, a cause that had become my personal mission. It was poetic justice. The very money she was counting on would instead help people who had been through the kind of pain she had inflicted on me. I played my role to perfection, acting like the doting husband while systematically dismantling the future she had so arrogantly planned. Every morning, I'd kiss her goodbye, whispering empty words of love, and every night, I'd watch her eyes light up with the glow of her hidden phone screen, texting the man who was once my best friend. She had no idea that every smile, every laugh, every casual conversation was a part of the trap I was setting. Emily began talking more and more about our future. She would casually drop hints about exotic vacations, dream homes, and expensive gifts she hoped to buy. It was as if she was planning how to spend my money before I was even gone. And why wouldn't she? In her mind, I was still the gullible husband who worshipped the ground she walked on. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger, playing me like a fool while she kept her real life hidden just beneath the surface. "I've been thinking, maybe we should look into buying that beach house in Malibu you always wanted," she suggested one evening, her eyes sparkling with feigned excitement. "Maybe," I said, feigning interest. "We'll see how things go." She smiled, satisfied, already envisioning herself lounging by the ocean, basking in the luxury she believed was her birthright. Little did she know, I had no intention of buying her anything except the harsh reality that was coming her way. As for Mark, I made sure to handle him with the same calculated precision. I began to subtly distance myself from him, canceling our usual hangouts and avoiding his calls. When we did cross paths, I was always polite but distant, careful not to tip him off. He assumed I was just busy with work, and maybe a little tired, which suited me perfectly. The last thing I wanted was for him to suspect that I knew about the affair. He needed to keep thinking he'd gotten away with it. One afternoon, Mark tried to corner me at a business event, likely wanting to reconnect. He clapped me on the shoulder, his smile as fake as his friendship. "Hey, man, we've gotta hit the golf course again soon. It's been way too long." I nodded, forcing a casual grin. "Yeah, definitely. Just been swamped with work lately. You know how it is." He laughed, oblivious to the fact that our friendship was already dead. I watched him walk away, still smug, still convinced that he'd pulled one over on me. But I took solace in the knowledge that his time was running out. The walls were closing in, and soon, there would be nowhere for him or Emily to hide. In the weeks that followed, I kept up the act, playing the role of the loving husband to perfection. But every smile, every touch, every sweet word was laced with the bitterness of betrayal. I watched as Emily continued her affair right under my nose, blissfully unaware that I was pulling the strings. And all the while, the pieces of my plan fell perfectly into place. I was no longer the naive husband, blind to the deception unfolding around me. I was the architect of their downfall, and the moment of reckoning was fast approaching. Emily and Mark believed they had everything under control, but they were living in a fantasy, one that was about to be ripped away from them in the most spectacular fashion. Our wedding anniversary arrived like an omen, marking the perfect moment for the grand finale I had meticulously planned. I chose an upscale restaurant, one that Emily adored, with dim lighting, fine wine, and an air of elegance that screamed exclusivity. It was the kind of place where we had celebrated our happiest moments, and tonight, it would be the setting of her greatest downfall. I invited a small group of close friends, including Mark, of course. Emily was thrilled, thinking I was going above and beyond to celebrate us. Little did she know, this wasn't just a celebration, it was the unveiling of her lies and deceit. As we sat down, she beamed, wearing a dress I had bought her, a shimmering, expensive number that now felt like a cruel reminder of everything I'd wasted on her. The evening began like any other, filled with laughter and small talk. Emily played the part of the doting wife perfectly, leaning into me, whispering sweet nothings, and acting as though we were still the perfect couple she had fooled everyone into believing. Mark was there too, sitting across the table, nervously fiddling with his glass, his eyes darting between Emily and me, unaware that he was about to be caught in a snare of his own making. As the main course arrived, I stood up, tapping my glass gently with a fork to capture everyone's attention. Emily looked up, her eyes sparkling with excitement, expecting a toast to our undying love. Mark watched me too, with a slight smirk, as if he were part of some inside joke that I was too clueless to understand. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady, but carrying a weight that filled the room. "I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about something important, trust." Emily's smile faltered slightly, but she kept her composure, glancing nervously at Mark. The other guests listened attentively, unaware of the storm that was about to break. "Trust," I continued, "is the foundation of every relationship. It's what binds us together, makes us feel safe, and gives us the courage to open our hearts. But when that trust is broken, well, the pain of betrayal can cut deeper than any blade." I paused, letting my words sink in, watching as Emily's expression shifted from anticipation to unease. Mark shifted in his seat, his confident demeanor beginning to crumble as he glanced nervously around the table. "You know," I said, looking directly at Emily, "we've had our share of ups and downs, but I always believed that we would weather any storm. I never imagined that the real storm would come from the two people I trusted most." Emily's face paled, the color draining as if she had seen a ghost. She shot a quick, panicked look at Mark, who was now fidgeting uncomfortably, his eyes wide with fear. The atmosphere at the table shifted, everyone could sense that something was horribly wrong. "I know about the affair," I said plainly, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "I know about the lies, the deceit, and the night spent in hotel rooms when you both thought you were untouchable. You thought I was clueless, that you could play me for a fool. But the truth always has a way of coming out, doesn't it?" Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Mark tried to stammer out an excuse, his words tumbling over each other in a pathetic attempt to explain the inexplicable. "We didn't mean, it just happened," Mark mumbled, his face flushed with shame. Emily, still in shock, reached out to touch my arm. I can explain, please. It was a mistake." But I wasn't interested in her excuses. I calmly pulled out a folder from my jacket and placed it on the table. "No explanations needed. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. But there's one more thing you should know." I opened the folder, revealing the freshly signed documents. "I've changed my will. Everything, our house, the cars, the investments, every last cent has been donated to charity. A charity that helps single fathers and betrayed spouses, to be exact. The money you were counting on will never be yours. Emily's eyes widened in horror as she stared at the documents, her face contorting with disbelief. She frantically leafed through the pages, her hands shaking, her perfect world crumbling before her eyes. Mark sat frozen, his mouth hanging open, finally grasping the magnitude of their betrayal and the consequences that would follow. "You can't do this!" Emily cried, her voice cracking. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" I replied, my voice calm but resolute. "Was it fair when you betrayed me with my best friend? Was it fair when you made me the laughingstock of my own life? You wanted my money, Emily, and now it's gone. Just like you." Emily broke down, sobbing uncontrollably as she realized she had lost everything she had schemed for. Mark sat in silence, too stunned to speak, his world collapsing just as swiftly. I watched them both, feeling nothing but a profound sense of closure. The game they thought they were winning was over, and the prize they coveted was gone. The silence that followed was deafening, the final nail in the coffin of what once was. I looked around the table at the stunned faces of our friends, then back at Emily and Mark, who were now shadows of the confident people they had been when the night began. "You made your choices," I said, my voice steady. "Now you get to live with them." And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to the ruins of their betrayal. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had taken back control of my life, and nothing could take that away from me. The days following that fateful dinner were a whirlwind of fallout and reckoning. Emily, once the picture of elegance and poise, was now a shell of her former self, struggling to adapt to the harsh reality she had crafted with her own lies. Word of the public revelation spread quickly, and the story of her affair became the talk of our social circle. Friends who had once admired her turned their backs, unwilling to associate with the woman who had so brazenly betrayed her husband and flaunted her infidelity. Without my money to prop up her lifestyle, Emily's world began to unravel. The luxurious spa days, designer clothes, and upscale dinners were replaced by unpaid bills, and the harsh reality of a life she never prepared for. She tried to cling to Mark, thinking that at least she wouldn't face the fallout alone. But when Mark realized that there was no financial gain left in sticking around, he too made a hasty exit, leaving Emily to face the ruins of her decisions by herself. The man she had risked everything for walked away without a backward glance, proving that his loyalty had been as hollow as their affair. Emily tried to salvage her reputation, but the damage was irreparable. No amount of carefully crafted lies or tearful apologies could mend the bridges she had burned. People saw through her, recognizing her not as the charming, graceful woman she once pretended to be, but as someone who had thrown away everything for the thrill of deceit. She was left with nothing but her own regret, a fitting end for someone who had gambled with other people's trust and lost it all. Meanwhile, my life took a different path. After that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. I spent the following weeks finalizing the transfer of my assets to the charity, a cause that had grown close to my heart. Knowing that my wealth would now help others who had been betrayed and left behind gave me a sense of purpose that far outweighed the material things I'd given up. I downsized my life, moving into a smaller but comfortable home where I could focus on myself for the first time in years. The things I thought I needed, status, luxury, the constant appearance of success, suddenly seemed meaningless. What mattered now was my newfound freedom and the satisfaction of knowing that I had reclaimed my life on my own terms. I spent my days exploring new hobbies, reconnecting with old friends who had stood by me, and even finding joy in the simplest of things, a long walk in the park, a quiet evening with a good book, or the satisfaction of volunteering at the very charity I now supported. My story, once defined by betrayal and loss, had become one of resilience and redemption. Occasionally, I would hear whispers about Emily's struggles, about how she was barely scraping by, moving from one temporary job to another, and living in a small apartment that was worlds away from the luxury she once took for granted. But I no longer felt anger or bitterness. I had made my peace with the past, knowing that the best revenge was the life I was living now, a life free from deceit, built on my own terms. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that betrayal, painful as it was, had been the catalyst for reclaiming my life. It had forced me to confront the illusions I had been living under and had given me the strength to forge a new path, one that was true to who I was. I decided to share my story, hoping it would resonate with others who found themselves lost in their own struggles. I wanted people to understand that no matter how deep the betrayal, there was always a way to rise above it. There was always a path to healing and triumph if you had the courage to take it. In the end, my message was simple but powerful. Betrayal might break your heart, but sometimes, it's the perfect catalyst for reclaiming your life. Trust your instincts, value your self-respect, and never let anyone's deceit define your worth. Because in the ashes of every betrayal, there lies the chance for a new beginning. And with those words, I closed the chapter on a life that once seemed perfect but was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. Now, I was living a truth that was far more valuable than any amount of wealth, a truth that no one could ever take away from me. Thank you for listening to this powerful story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. If you enjoyed this tale of a man rising above deceit and taking back control of his life, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more gripping stories of men who refuse to be victims and instead, turn the tables to come out stronger. Make sure to subscribe to Only Stories About Men and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We have plenty more stories of courage, justice, and the sweet satisfaction of overcoming life's toughest challenges. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the husband's revenge? And remember, every story has a lesson, and sometimes, the best revenge is living your life to the fullest. See you in the next one.